and a particular good evening and very warm welcome to any members of the public who may be viewing us as we are streamed on YouTube. This is a meeting of the East Arts District Council Development Management Committee. It's being held on Wednesday, the 17th of June. Because we're virtual, I'm going to start by introducing members of the committee, and then I will introduce the supporting officers. My name is Bob Deering. I'm the chairman of the committee. The vice chairman is Councillor Tony Stowe. If you could just wave on the screen, Tony, so people can see you, please. Did I see you? Well, I did. Yes. Okay. And then simply in the order that the names appear on the agenda paper, and just ask Councillor Andrews to give us a wave. Thank you very much, David. Councillor Dumont is substituting for Councillor Beckett. Thank you very much, Councillor Dumont. Councillor Ruth Buckmaster. Thank you. Councillor Ben Crystal. Thank you very much. Councillor Andrew Huggins. Thank you. Councillor Jeff Jones. Thank you, Jeff. Councillor Ian Kemp. Thank you. Councillor Tim Page. Yes, thank you, Tim. I was worried there for a moment. Councillor Carolyn Redfern. Thank you. Councillor Peter Ruffles. Thank you very much indeed. And then if we just move on to the officers, I'm simply going to take the officers in the order that they happen to show up on my computer screen. So the first one is Peter Mannings.
Hello.
Then we have Fiona Dunning. Then we have Stephen King, Victoria Wilders, Sarah Saunders, and finally another member who is the portfolio holder that's responsible for this area, and that's Councillor Jane Goodeve. Thank you very much indeed. So for the benefit of the public, it's only the members who will vote on tonight's planning application. Officers have done the work on the application, and officers will advise members tonight as the need may arise. Thank you very much for that, everybody. If I now move on to item 1, there is one apology for absence, which is Councillor Beckett, and as has already been made clear, he is substituted by Councillor Dumont. Thank you very much for substituting Councillor Dumont.
That's correct, Chair. That's what I was told. That's correct.
Thank you. Item 2 is Chairman's announcements. I have no, well, actually, I was going to say I have no announcements, but actually I do. And I might look sideways to Sarah Saunders, who's the head of planning. And we certainly have a small announcement in relation to the NHS, don't we, Sarah? If you'd like to develop that for members' benefit, please.
We do. Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I just want to take the opportunity to provide a couple of updates to committee. And the first relates to developer contributions for healthcare provision. So you'll recall at a previous committee earlier in the year, there was concern raised by a number of members of the committee about the lack of contributions towards healthcare provision. And we discussed specifically pooled contributions towards mental health, community healthcare and acute healthcare, and that we cannot secure those contributions without appropriate justification. And it was agreed, because of the concern raised, that we should look at this further and see what can be done to improve the provision, and to see whether we can provide and be successful in seeking contributions in the future. So as a result, we have written to our contacts at the East and North Herts CCG and received a positive response from them about working together to improve the overall position. And the leader of the council has also raised this matter with the East of England Local Government Association, as well as other districts through the Hertfordshire Infrastructure and Planning Partnership. And we found through raising that other districts are experiencing the same of us, as us in relation to contributions. So there's a desire to see if we can seek contributions, but there just isn't the justification when it comes down to it for us to secure it. So it's been raised directly with the CCG, but also through other forums, and the response has been really promising about us working collectively in order to improve the situation. So we're working through the detail of the next steps, but I wanted to give you an update because it had been raised at the previous DMC, and there were a number of councillors who raised that. And I hope that at a future meeting I'll be able to provide you with a further update. But I think it's just important to raise that's been followed up and it's promising, and we hope we can improve the situation. So that's an announcement in relation to contributions for healthcare provision. And then I just had an announcement in relation to land east of Stevenage, because members will recall that the committee considered the planning application for land east of Stevenage at the committee meeting in February. And some of you may be aware that the Secretary of State was looking at whether he wanted to call in the application for a decision, and I'm pleased to say that the Secretary of State has decided that he's not going to call in the application for a decision, and is satisfied that the decision has been made locally. So there wasn't a formal request to call it in. It's been looked at, and the Secretary of State has decided not to call it in. So that's really good news from our perspective. And again, I thought that would be helpful to provide that update to committee.
Thank you very much indeed, Sarah. I'm sure the committee is extremely pleased to hear both those items of news. As regards the East of Stevenage application, it's very nice to know that the approach that officers have taken and the committee on decision has taken has been justified as being sound and appropriate. It's very, very good news. It's a vindication of the work this committee does. And in relation to the NHS, I'm sure I speak for every member of this committee, but also members of this committee who were on the previous DMC and the previous civic round. We're really pleased to feel that representations are being made to the effect that it would be nice to see the NHS participating more in the Section 106 process. I think it's extremely good news. As I'm saying this to you, I'm looking at one or two members who I know were on the previous committee, and I know made these comments on the previous committee, and I know they will be very pleased indeed to hear this news. Thank you very much indeed for that progress. Thank you. That moves us on to item 3, declarations of interest. If anyone has a declaration of interest, now is the moment. I can't see anything. No. Thank you very much. Item 4, minutes of the previous meeting dated the 29th of April 2020. Are we happy with the minutes, or does anyone have a comment? I'm taking those to be thumbs up.
I'm happy to propose them, Chairman.
Okay, so
Chairman, I have a comment, Chairman.
Just 1 second. Okay, Councillor Andrews, do please comment. Thank you. I think you may be muted, Andrew. David, we're waiting for your comment.
Thank you, Chairman. I did carefully note it down earlier, but of course now the need has arisen. I can't find the post-it note, but I think from memory, if we go to page 11, last paragraph, let me just scan through on mine. Bear with me. As I say, I did carefully note this down and equally carefully lost it. Yeah. Okay. So if we go to page 11, last line, it reads, the benefits would not weigh in the green belt harm, and I think it should be advised that the benefits would not
Outweigh.
exactly outweigh. Small point, yeah, but it's significant. Thank you.
Well made. Thank you also, Peter. Did anybody else have a comment? Councillor Ruffles, I wasn't sure if your hand was up by way of approval or comment.
No, it was in anticipation of someone proposing and seconding. I wanted to approve.
Yeah, very quick off the mark. It's impressive. So I think with the small amendment that Councillor Andrews has identified, can I have a proposer for the minutes? I think Councillor Huggins, thank you.
Yes.
And I'm taking Councillor Ruth Buckmaster as a seconder. Thank you very much.
Right.
And I think we just call for a vote. All those in favour, all happy?
Okay, yeah, we're good.
You've got that, Peter? Thank you very much
Any,
indeed.
any against? Don't think so.
Yes,
No.
happy. Thank you very much, everybody. So let's now move on to item 5, which is planning applications. And in particular, item 5A. Item 5A commences at page 19 of the pack and is application number 319-0226 FUL. It's an application for the demolition of dwelling at number 125 Dunmow Road and relocation and widening of the existing crossover to create a new access road to the land to the rear, consisting of the rear section of gardens of 123 to 127 Dunmow Road, to allow the construction of 9 new houses on the land to the rear and a relocated replacement dwelling for number 125 Dunmow Road. The case officer for this application is Fiona Dunning, and I will therefore ask Fiona, please, to speak to her paper.
Thank you, Chairman. Since writing the report, there's been a few queries that councillors have raised with me. So I'll just run through those before going through the presentation. These clarifications were in relation to the number of dwellings proposed, whether there could be a contribution towards sustainable transport strategy for cycling improvements, with specific reference to a cycle route along Parsonage Lane to the north of the site. And the final clarification was in relation to the sustainability statement not being provided as part of the application. So I'll briefly address those 3 matters. The number of dwellings, the application was amended at the request of officers, and the plans before you tonight are for the demolition of the existing dwelling and the erection of 9 terrace dwellings at the rear and 1 detached dwelling towards the front of the site. The detached dwelling at the front of the site replaces the dwelling that is to be demolished. This means that there's an additional 9 dwellings on the site. In relation to the contributions under the Community Infrastructure Levy regulations, there are 3 tests that need to be met in order for contributions to be requested by a council. And those 3 tests are whether the contribution is necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms, whether it directly relates to the development, and if it's fairly and reasonably related to in scale and kind to the development. In the assessment of the application, it was determined that a contribution didn't meet these tests, and that's why a contribution is included in the recommendation. In relation to sustainability, under the current local validation list, which was adopted in March 2019, a sustainability statement is required for all planning applications. The application was submitted prior to this date, and the reason it's been delayed is a result of officers and the applicant working together to resolve some of the issues that came up during the assessment of the application. I have spoken to the applicant, and there are a number of measures in sustainability terms that are proposed, and it's in order to meet or exceed the building regulations. And in addition, there are other measures in place like sustainable drainage, permeable paving, and water butts on the site proposed. So now I'll move to the slides. We can look at the first one. Okay, thank you. Looking at the characteristics of the site, this slide shows the location in relation to the adjoining buildings and nearby buildings. So you'll see in the left-hand corner there's quite dense dwellings facing Dunmore Road. And then to the north and east, there are large industrial buildings. And then either side of the site, there's detached dwellings and also semi-detached dwellings. So there's quite a mixture of dwellings in the area. We move to the next slide, the proposed block plan. This shows the industrial buildings in a bit more detail, the siting of those. The two adjoining residential dwellings, which are detached dwellings, and then the site itself with the proposed parking, the single dwelling at the front of the site, and then the nine terrace dwellings at the rear of the site, and some landscaping is indicated around the site. We move to the next slide that provides a little bit more information on the plans. So you see at the top of the screen the replacement dwelling and the driveway into the site, and then the 9 terrace dwellings at the rear of the site and the parking. The report mentions a substation, and that's located at the bottom left-hand side of the screen. And this substation is not on the site itself, but adjoins the site. And the closest dwelling, which is house 1, is approximately 4 to 5 meters from the substation. And so a noise assessment was submitted with the application, and there are recommendations in the noise assessment, which the environmental health officer was satisfied with. And so there is a proposed condition attached to the recommendation. One of the suggestions in the noise assessment was to increase the height of the boundary fence to 3 meters, and that would overcome the issue with any noise to that property. And I should also point out that that property doesn't have any windows facing the substation. Okay, if we move to the next slide. This slide just shows the access way and the proposed footpath down into the site from Dunmore Road, and then also you see the sightline splays. So there was quite a bit of work undertaken with the highways officers, but they're now satisfied with the proposal. So if we move to the next one. So if I go through the plans that are on the screen, if I start at the top of the screen. So this shows the proposed terrace dwellings at the rear. There's 3 of them in the middle are taller than the ones on the side. There are 6 3-bedroom properties, and they're mainly in the middle section. And then there are 3 2-bedroom properties, and 2 are on the right-hand side of the screen, and 1 of them's on the left-hand side. So the appearance of these dwellings, the architect has tried to keep the height of the dwellings as low as possible by creating more or less a room in the roof at the highest level. So the 2-bedroom dwellings have the appearance of being 1.5 stories. Sorry, if we could just go back to the previous 2 slides. I just wanted to, if we could go, sorry, yes. I just wanted to highlight the distance between 127 and the rear of, or the front of the terrace houses. It's over 30 meters. So there's no issue with overlooking or loss of privacy to the adjoining residents. So if we can move back then to the elevations. Thank you. So the elevation, the northeast elevation, is the rear of the proposed terrace dwellings. and six of them have rooms in the roof, and 3 of them, the ones in the middle, the tallest ones, have a full 3rd story. And then the elevations below, the sections below show each of the different styles of dwelling. So the one on the left is the 2-bedroom dwelling. The one in the middle are the smaller 3-bedroom dwellings. And then the one on the right-hand side are the larger, the taller 3-bedroom dwellings. Thank you. If we can move to the next slide. And this is just a sketch model showing what the front building, the single dwelling, would appear from the street, and also at the rear of the site, the terrace dwellings. And then the next slide also has an aerial shot of what the proposed development would appear, how it would appear. So in summary, neighbours were consulted on the original plans and amendments were undertaken, and the comments in the report at section 7.1 include concerns in relation to the original plan as well as the amended plans. And the applicant has worked with officers to resolve some of the matters that were raised during the assessment of the application. And with this, with these amendments, the application is recommended for approval, subject to a number of conditions, including quite a number of pre-commencement conditions. So no development could commence until all of those conditions are addressed by the applicant. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Just going to nod sideways to Peter Mannings. I believe we have one public speaker who will speak in favour of this application.
Yes.
And that is Mr. Anthony Hoodless.
Yes, we need to get him admitted to the meeting, so we'll let that happen.
Okay.
And I will time him from when he starts to speak.
And we'll just wait for him to appear on the screen.
He'll have 3 minutes.
Oh, here we go. Excellent. Mr. Hoodless, welcome. But just before you start, just say one thing. At the minute, you are muted, so don't forget to unmute before you start. That's quite important because you have 3 minutes, and we do enforce the 3 minutes. So if you're midstream when we get to the end of the 3rd minute, you will be cut off. So don't waste your first few seconds by being muted. So let's hand the microphone over to Mr. Hoodless, who is going to speak in favour of this application. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for your time. My name's Tony Hoodless. I'm the director of the applicant company, and we're a very small development company, typical building on infill, brownfield or problematic sites in and around Hertfordshire and in London itself. In addition to residential schemes, we're also responsible for creating employment in East Hart by building industrial starter units in Buntingford, which are an asset to the town. We recently gained further approval, some additional units there, which are in demand according to the agents, and which will also be an asset to the town. Our aim is to create well-designed, energy-efficient, secure homes built in excess of minimum space standards and to very high quality to ensure people enjoy the spaces we create and have a good quality of life in them. We think the proposed development of 10 family homes on land at Dunmore Road is an example of a site such as this. It has numerous problems which we've worked with the planners for in excess of 2 years to overcome, and the scheme, in our opinion, looks very good and uses the space effectively. We've spoken to local agents, and the houses proposed are what is now required by the market. They're very keen on them and say there's quite a significant demand for houses of this type and size. We aim to make the homes affordable for young families. The external layout is designed to create a safe outdoor play environment, and the interior spaces are very flexible to allow families to expand over the years. We've worked closely with the planning department at East Herts and also their consultants for in excess of 2 years. We consider our proposals represent a very well designed scheme rather than some of the generic boxes turned out by national developers. We are a very local developer. I live local to the site. The scheme shows architectural merit and will produce a high quality but still affordable housing scheme which respects its neighbours and provides a safe environment for its residents. Thank you for your time.
I'm muted. I beg your pardon, I was muted there. Let me just repeat that. Thank you very much, Mr. Hoodless. It was very nice of you to come and speak to us. I think
Thank you.
you're right on 3 minutes, but I hope you're happy with your time contribution.
That's fine.
Thank you very much. If I could now just open the floor up to members. If anybody wishes to speak or ask a question, can you show your hand to the camera like this, please, and we'll find you. Okay, I have Councillor Page and then Councillor Dumont.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got 3 queries really on which appear in the report. There seems to be some acknowledgement that there are potential issues with Herts crime prevention. There seems to be an issue with Power Networks, who say that their policy is to be 10 metres away from housing, and the explanation given by the officer concerning noise mitigation, I'm not altogether sure that Power Networks were talking about noise when they said that there were mitigation measures that could be adopted. And finally, the landscape advice, which appears in the planning portal rather than the report, is quite strongly negative, but only acknowledged in the report as being of some concern. I wonder if we could have the officer's take on those 3 observations, questions.
Thank you very much, Tim. Councillor Dumont, if you want to raise your point now, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The developer who kindly spoke, he mentioned a few times he described it as affordable housing. So I just wanted to clarify, is that his opinion that it's affordable, or is it would we consider it as a council affordable under our definitions in our local plan and our local policies, or was that just his opinion?
I'll take one more question now if anybody has one. Otherwise, Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just a question. So we touched on the substation issue. That's what I was going to ask the same. I think, am I right in saying that the officer is now saying it's between 4 and 5 metres from the nearest residence, which is very close. It really is, isn't it? And the mitigation measures, I think we're talking about a 6-foot fence. I think we all know these substations, you know, they give quite a high frequency hum. It's just constant. It's not a sort of banging or anything, but it does concern me anyway. So I'd be interested to hear a little bit more on the substation issue, because that is extremely close. And I'd be interested to know the officer's opinion. Would you consider this a backyard development, a sort of garden grab, really? And how does that stand? I know it's subjective, isn't it, garden grab? Just wonder how that stands with our district plan, and probably more importantly, the local neighbourhood plan. I think there is a neighbourhood plan for this area. So yeah, that's my questions. Thank you.
Okay. Fiona, if I could ask you to respond to those various points, please.
Thank you, Chairman. In relation to crime prevention of the single dwelling, it was It was the fact that the access way was adjoining the rear garden of the detached dwelling. There is a proposed condition that addresses that by asking for further information. There's ways to deal with that, various ways of preventing someone from jumping over a fence and breaking into a property. And so there is a condition. I don't have the condition number, I'm sorry, but there is a proposed condition in that regard. The power network, it was my understanding that it related to the noise, and because it was addressed in the noise assessment, and the environmental health officer didn't raise it. So I understood that there was no issue in terms of safety, but I don't have any further information on that. I'm sorry. And the landscaping, the policy DES3 of the local plan, the district plan, talks about compensatory planting when trees need to be removed from the site. Some of the tree survey that was undertaken and the assessment showed that there are a number of trees that were in poor condition, and some of those trees were in the center of the site, and quite the large trees that were that are on the site. So the proposed new trees are to be native trees, so that's quite a benefit. They're also going to be younger than the existing trees, so in terms of sustainability, it would be better for the property. And some of those trees are on the boundary of the proposed house 1, and it was clear that the existing house at 123 Dunmore Road has planted a lot of trees along there to help with the noise issue. So that's, I think there are those 3 areas that Councillor Page requested further information. Would you like me to continue with?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Dumont's query about affordable, it's not technically affordable housing in terms of the NPPF because it's there's no section 106 proposed. I think the applicant was stating that they're more affordable because they're terrace houses, so they're going to be cheaper to live in because of sustainability issues, and also they're smaller dwellings, although the room sizes are generous. They're smaller dwellings, so they're not mansions. So I think that's what he was referring to in terms of being affordable. And Councillor Jones raised the substation. I don't have anything further to add on that because, as I said before, the environmental health officer didn't raise any concerns with the distance between the proposed dwellings and the substation. And finally, Councillor Jones, backland development. I think it's a hybrid development because it is taking 2 of the gardens from the adjoining properties, but overall, I think I wouldn't class it as background development because it's got a generous access way into the rear of the site. It doesn't appear like it is backland development when viewed from Dunmore Road because of the landscaping along the access way and also the dwelling at the front. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Fiona. Does anyone have any further questions, or indeed would anybody like to respond to the points made? I've got hands from Councillor Huggins, Councillor Crystal, and Councillor Page again. We take you in that order, please. So, Councillor Huggins.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, so just coming back on that last point, I think we're talking in terms of policy, and how are we setting a precedent about allowing the development on gardens and increasing the density in this way. So I think that's particularly the area of concern there. And I also am not overly satisfied with the answer given about the power station and the 6 meters in regards to it just being about noise when they have asked for 10. So that's my thoughts and questions so far, Chairman.
Very much. Well, if we, Fiona, just make notes of these questions, we'll take the questions together, and then you can respond en bloc as well, please. So I think we then had Councillor Crystal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I quite like the design. I mean, it's subjective, but I think that the design of the houses themselves do appear to be rather smart. But I appreciate that is objective, subjective. I've got a question from the planning statement. So the planning statement discusses a proposed home zone, referring to the area in front of the houses, where there was tree screening, planting, outdoor seating, bicycle store, so a on-site bicycle store for 16 bicycles, and a play area with permanent play equipment. Now, I appreciate that that's in the planning statement. I wanted to find out, and I like the sound of this. I think it sounds quite a relatively safe area, could potentially be a relatively safe area for kind of observed play for children, and I think the developer has some kind of nice comparisons with the way things are built in Holland, for example. But I wanted to find out really why they don't appear to be on the plan. As I understand, there's no bike stores and no permanent play area. I wondered why. Is it possible to get a permanent bike store out there? I think it would benefit. And one more thing. I know that the trees aren't described as being very valuable, and I understand that. I should just point out that even dead trees are valuable in terms of wildlife. I think something like 30% of organisms on a site will use a dead tree as food and shelter. But I just wondered whether it might be possible to ask the developer whether they would consider putting in some bird boxes to help with birds nesting until the new trees reach maturity. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Crystal. I think we now have you, Tim Page, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like just to explore a little more about the landscape proposals. The landscape officer's advice, amongst other things, contained the statement that the proposals fail to allow sufficient space for the planting of trees along the access road, and they fail to allow for the opening of car doors due to the proposed seating and planting next to the parking bays. Could I have some officer response to those two statements?
Thank you very much. Okay, Fiona, I think they're all your points. If you could give us your responses, we'd be grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. If I can start with Councillor Page's queries. I think that those comments that the landscape officer has made are on older plans, because the access way provides 1.7 meters adjacent to 123 Dunmore Road. So that is wide enough to have landscaping along adjacent to the access road into the site. In relation to the seating, I'm not exactly sure what the officer is referring to, because possibly he's referring to using the front garden for amenity reasons. Normally, people don't use the front garden for that purpose. I think the access way into the dwellings is wide enough, and there's also the bin store. So I don't think that there is any issue with vehicles and impacting on using or accessing the front of the site. In relation to Councillor Crystal's queries, the application originally had the home zone, and so it was amended. I wasn't the case officer at the time, so I don't know the full history of why it was amended and why the bike stores were taken out of the proposal. But I think that looking at the area, it certainly would be able to be used by families as a play area, because I think I mentioned it in my report, the kitchens overlook the front of the site. So, you know, parents and guardians would have the opportunity of looking out and making sure that it was safe. And there's only, while it's an access to the car parking areas, vehicles wouldn't be going at a fast rate, and there's it will be landscaped, so it will be quite enclosed. So I think that there is an opportunity for families to use that area, and even, you know, to gather as a community, you know, similar to a street. That's the way that I looked at the proposed design. And because they are single dwellings, I thought that generally residents would probably prefer to store their bikes closer to the dwelling rather than within the communal open space area. Bird boxes, I'm sure that the applicant would be happy to agree a condition in relation to that. And it may even be a requirement in order to meet the requirements of sustainability measures. But that, to be clear, there are trees being retained on the site, and the aerial photos show that there are significant trees at the rear. And there's also, beyond those trees on the site, there's a hedge on the industrial land, and also on the other industrial areas, there is some landscaping. And when the tree consultant visited the property, they would have looked at, you know, if there are any nests in the trees. And certainly the trees wouldn't be able to be removed in the summertime, or nothing. If this committee approves the development, nothing can happen until there's a number of conditions that are met. So I think, yeah, but I don't think there's anything more to add there. In relation to Councillor Huggins' queries about density and the substation, the density of the development is addressed in the report, and it's between you know, the lower density around the site and the higher density, so it sits somewhere in the middle. So it's about 42 dwellings per hectare, I think. So that's a standard, that's a sort of standard density that most developments are achieving, and it's also, they're all single dwellings. So if you look at the area, it's adjoining an industrial land at the back. It's at the front of the site on the other side of the road. There are dwellings that are very dense. I think that's where the 60 odd dwellings per hectare are located. So I think that, you know, in terms of the character and the density, it was considered that this was suitable. And I think if it does set a precedent, although planning officers would say that no development sets a precedent, but if it does, I think that there are very good characteristics of this site that could be picked up on other sites, you know, in terms of design and working with the council officers and other statutory officers to achieve a good development. In relation to the substation, I can't add anything more to what I previously have. You know, I'm not an expert in that, but I would rely on the environmental health officer to look at that. And if they had concerns with the distance from the proposed dwelling to the substation, then they would have raised it. Thank you.
Thank you again, Fiona. I'm looking at my screen. If anybody who's raised a question wants to come back, of course you can. I'm wondering, Councillor Crystal, if you're happy with the answer in relation to the bike provision. And don't seem to have anybody coming back. So I now have Councillor Jones and Councillor Jones and Councillor Kemp in that order, please.
Just a question there on section 106 contributions, which I think I probably missed. Did we cover that? Is there any way we can get some contributions for sustainable transport from this development? I think there was talk of the footpath as well, Parsonage Lane footpath, that I mentioned. Perhaps the officer could respond to that. Thank you.
Councillor Kemp.
Yeah, just a couple of comments. I think any infill site like this is always going to cause some difficulties to neighbours. It does appear, however, that in this case, it's a relatively modest impact, given that there are two sides of the site which are actually bordering onto an industrial estate rather than other homes. Concerns have been raised by residents about increased traffic and the like, but the proportion for this number of dwellings seems to be relatively small compared to the surrounding area. And it's good, of course, to see 10 new houses being added to the housing stock. One thing that was concerning me was the trees. There do seem to be a number of good, well-established mature trees, particularly around the outside. And so I was very pleased to hear Fiona Dunning's statement that some of these will be retained. I certainly hope that a good number will be retained and mixed with the new trees.
Thank you very much, Ian. So I think you've got, in effect, a question from Councillor Jones, certainly, Fiona, and you might want to comment on the trees, Councillor Kemp, maybe.
Sure. In relation to the trees, there is, trees are being retained, as I said, and there are conditions protecting the trees during construction and retaining them for a period of 5 years. So if anything does occur to them similar to landscaping, that they will need to be replaced during that time. In relation to the section 106, I did mention it in my, just the 3 issues at the beginning of the report. Sorry, Councillor Jones, you may have missed it. The SIL regulations have certain tests that need to be met, and and those tests are if it's necessary to make the development acceptable, if it relates to the development directly, and if it's fairly and reasonably related to the scale and kind of development. So those 3 tests were considered in relation to the cycle improvement scheme for Parsonage Lane. And this site is quite remote to Parsonage Lane, and to actually access the town centre, which is approximately a mile to the west of the site, residents wouldn't use Parsonage Lane. So it doesn't relate to the development, and it's considered that it wouldn't be fairly or reasonably applied to this development either. So it wasn't considered that it didn't meet those tests, and therefore the section 106 couldn't be required.
Thank you, Fiona. I have Councillor Page. Councillor Page.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I've got a question back to impacts. A survey, we're told on 8.24 that a survey had been completed. That survey, amongst other things, identified aircraft noise and made recommendations on the roof materials. This is quite unusual, I think, to have this in a report. I'm just wondering whether the recommendations spoken about here are recommendations from the company undertaking the noise survey, or are they recommendations which will be taken up by the council? And if they are recommendations that will be taken up by the council, I can't find any reference to them in the conditions.
Fiona.
Thanks, Chairman. I don't have the conditions in front of me, but there is a condition in relation to required by the Environmental Health Officer in relation to noise. So any noise impacting on the dwellings would be addressed during construction phase. So the condition requires details to be provided prior to commencement, and then prior to first occupation of the dwellings, the noise officer has also requested further information to say that it meets the requirements for noise attenuation.
Yes, Councillor Page.
Yep. Yeah, thank you, Chairman. So we're going to leave this with the planners to determine whether the noise attenuation is okay, rather than accept specific recommendations from the noise analysts. And on the basis that there is noise from overflying aircraft, if we accept that on this application, are we not making a policy for ourselves elsewhere regarding overflying aircraft?
Fiona, just before you respond to that, I saw Councillor Jones' mouth moving, but I couldn't hear anything. I don't know whether you're meant to speak, you intended to speak to the group, Jeff, or you're muted or whatever.
No, no, not at all. I was muting a response, but it didn't need the microphone. So, okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, Fiona, there you go.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just looking for the proposed condition. It is condition number 8 of the report, and it talks about protection of the dwellings from noise from adjacent industrial and commercial units shall be submitted to and approved in writing. It doesn't specifically refer to aircraft noise, but then it refers to other the recommendations set out in the Cole-Jarman Planning Noise and Assessment Report. So the noise officer has looked at that and is satisfied with the report that was submitted, that what's set out in that report, that condition has addressed the issue for future occupants.
Thank you, Fiona. I'm just going to come back to Councillor Page. It's quite an important point. Are you content with that answer, Councillor Page?
Well, yes, I'm slightly not over the moon about the reply, but it does give us some certainty that the of noise will be reviewed. But the second part of my question was that I think it's rather unusual to hear about aircraft noise mitigation. And I just wonder if this was something volunteered by the noise assessment agency or something that the council wanted an answer on.
Thank you, Chairman. I think it was just a noise consultant who was undertaking a thorough job and possibly mentioned it at the time when he was at the site or she was at the site. But normally for applications under a flight path, we receive comments from the Aviation Authority, but I haven't come across aircraft noise as being an issue for other applications.
Okay, thank you again, Fiona. All right, we've had quite a good debate. I'm looking around my screen to see if there's any further hands raised.
Don't think so, Chairman.
No, thank you, Peter. I don't think I can see any either. So I think we've concluded the debate, and therefore I think it falls to me to ask if there is a proposer for this particular application. Ian, Councillor Kemp is proposing. Do I have a seconder?
Okay.
Councillor Ben Crystal, you got there first. You beat Ruth Buckmaster by a fraction of a second there. Well done. So we have a proposer and a seconder, in which case can I now call for a vote? All those in favour of granting this application, please show your hands now.
Okay, just keep them up while I count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 that I've counted at the moment.
Thank you very much, Peter. Are there any votes against?
Just looking.
Yeah.
Just checking, keep the hands up.
I can't see any.
No, must have been abstentions in there somewhere. Can we have those?
We'll get to that. Are there any abstentions?
Just looking. Can't see any either.
Can't see any abstentions. I've got a feeling the maths probably doesn't add up quite right there, Peter, but I think we still
have got 9 in favour anyway. One abstaining?
No, my sense of the meeting is that there's no votes against, and I couldn't see any abstentions. So I'm taking that as a unanimous vote in favour. So just to record then, in relation to application 319-0226 FUL, which relates to the demolition of dwelling at number 125 Dunmow Road and the relocation and widening of the existing crossover to create a new access road to the land to the rear, consisting of the rear section of gardens of 123-127 Dunmow Road, to allow the construction of 9 new houses on the land to the rear and a relocated replacement dwelling for number 125 Dunmow Road, all of which is Bishop Stortford. This committee has just agreed to grant that application. Thank you very much, everybody.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. So I think, yes, that moves us on to item 6, I think, which is simply items for reporting and noting.
Yeah, it's the usual things.
It doesn't call for debate. And then that moves us in turn on to item 7, urgent business. I'm unaware of any urgent business, but I am checking my screen.
Don't think so.
No, I can't see any hands raised. So I think that means we've completed the meeting. So just to record, the meeting is complete at 19:59. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.